On a frigid January night in 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found lifeless in the snow outside of 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. His body battered, bloodied, and exposed to a brutal nor'easter. What began as a tragic loss of a decorated officer quickly spiraled into one of the most controversial and emotionally charged trials in recent memory. His girlfriend, Karen Reed, once a finance professor, now stands accused of second-degree murder. Prosecutors say she struck O'Keefe with her SUV after a night of drinking, then left him to die. But Karen Reed's defense paints a darker tale, a conspiracy, a cover-up, a house full of secrets where fellow officers allegedly knew more than they let on. The courtroom is a battleground with each side trying to prove their story. Was this a lover's rage gone too far, or a frame-up born in the shadows of the blue wall of silence? Tonight, we take a look at all the biggest moments that could be the difference between guilt and reasonable doubt as the retrial of the century continues.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And prosecutors are getting pretty close to closing their case, wrapping up their case in chief against Karen Reed. That means when they do that, they believe they've presented enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she murdered John O'Keefe. And anyone looking at this case, if you watch the first trial and you're watching the second trial, regardless of which side you're on, if you're being intellectually honest, you have to concede that with fewer witnesses, Hank Brennan has really brought forth more evidence in this case than first time around. Think about that. Fewer witnesses, but more evidence. The detail of the digital evidence is much, much more involved this time around. But he's not adding witnesses, he's actually subtracting witnesses and making his case stronger. So again, regardless of which side of this you're on, if you watch the first case and you watch the second case and you compare prosecution number 1 to prosecution number 2, very different. But I think a little more powerful this time around. And that's not abnormal. That's very expected in a retrial. Prosecutors reevaluate the way they presented their case and they make adjustments. Here, there were a lot of adjustments, and it began with bringing in a new special prosecutor to think a little differently than the original prosecutor did in the presentation in 2024. So you look at that, that's a fact. It's a fact. You can say you don't like Hank Brennan, you can say you don't believe the evidence, but there's more evidence this time and fewer witnesses. Now, for the defense, I think you're also seeing a sharper cross-examination of witnesses. Like they know exactly where they want to go. They've divided up the cross-examination amongst the defense team, kind of relying more on specialties, which makes everything sharper, cleaner, and perhaps more effective. So you saw both sides retool in their approach in this case. Prosecutors have the burden, so they've got to improve a lot more than the defense has to improve second time around. Now, this has been a captivating case. And I said it going in, I've covered many retrials through the decades at Court TV. The first big one that Court TV had before I even got here were the Menendez brothers. Do you remember the second trial? Nobody remembers the second trial. We know they got convicted, but we don't really, everyone remembers that first trial and everything that was surrounding that first trial. And the retrial was somewhat anticlimactic, although it resulted in the convictions that are still in the news today, obviously. Putting that one aside, the rest of the retrials, because there are a lot of cases that aren't as high profile as Karen Reed or the Menendez brothers that end up in hung juries and they get tried again. And sometimes on Court TV, we're covering a retrial. And inevitably, the second case is always anticlimactic. The biggest one that I did was Rabbi Fred Newlander. The first trial was intense. The second trial was intense, but it was like, It didn't have that same edge that the first one did, despite the fact that it ended in a conviction. And do you hear a pattern here? You know, almost all the time, if someone is going to get a verdict in a retrial, if there's not a second hung jury, prosecutors usually win. That's, again, just a fact. Doesn't mean that it'll happen in this case, but that's how it usually goes. But this case has been incredibly captivating, with a lot of moments, a lot of evidence, and a lot of witnesses that have had an impact inside the courtroom, and an impact on our trial insiders who we bring in here night after night to give us their perspective. Folks who practice in Massachusetts, who know the lawyers, who know the judge, who know the evidence in this case. And tonight, we're going to take a look at what our trial insiders believe are some of the biggest moments, the biggest pieces of evidence, and the biggest witnesses that we've seen in this retrial. So let's bring them in. Joining me tonight, our Karen Reed insiders, longtime Massachusetts attorney, former homicide prosecutor Richard Grundy. Margaret McLean, former prosecutor and host of the podcast It's a Crime with Margaret McLean. Also with us, John DePietro, host and creator of Road Patrol Live, and Karen Reed supporter, also has been inside the courtroom throughout this case. Nick Rocco with us as well. Great to see everyone tonight. So we've got 3 segments. We're breaking it all down. And what we want to begin with is Margaret and John's big 3. So we took a look at the list that you put together, and we put together your big 3. And we begin with, and as the first one for you two, is the testimony of Dr. Aizik Wolf. And both of you actually agreed on this one. So let's take a listen to the testimony of the neurosurgeon who took time out from his brain surgery schedule to come up to Dedham, Massachusetts, and testify as an expert for the prosecution.
The only way he could get this kind of an injury was to fall backwards, hit the back of his head, and then the resulting, energy forces going into his brain, into his base of his skull. His injuries were very substantial, and it's more probable than not that at some point he quickly became unconscious and was unable to do functional activities.
Okay, Margaret, I'll begin with you. Why did you believe this was so important and such a big witness and a big part of his testimony?
Well, Vinnie, first of all, this guy is not your average expert witness. He's not your average hired gun. He performs brain surgeries. I mean, he's a brain surgeon. And, I've tried a lot of cases before, and usually you've got a hired gun, but this guy provided a very clear and concise explanation as to how John received his blunt force trauma to the head by falling backwards on the hard ground, and there was no evidence that he was struck by a bat or a hammer, because that would leave an indentation. It was so clear for me, and I could just picture it right there on the hard ground. So he was excellent.
John DePietro, you also believe this was a huge moment, a huge witness, and very important testimony. What are your thoughts?
Dr. Wolf, not only is he the best witness in the trial, he's one of the best witnesses I have ever seen, and he delivers it in this godlike Walter Cronkite type manner. Number one, she's right. They immediately eliminated the third-party culprit, but he talked about what happened in a manner that only a doctor could. He even talked about the death isn't always immediate. The death sometimes, if someone was shot behind their eardrum. He talked about and talked to the jury the way with this doctor, like out of central casting, would explain it. And when he painted the picture of John O'Keefe on the ground and still alive, but not unable to communicate, and essentially then freezing to death as he laid there, it just set up such a strong visual. He spoke in a manner that I haven't seen any witness speak to, certainly not in this trial. I'm not sure at any trial, but I believe this just was a different dynamic. And I think Dr. Wolf really changed the dynamic of this trial.
Nick, what did you see and hear from Dr. Wolf?
I mean, Hank Brennan really wanted him to say that he fell on a frozen ground, but that's not what he said. He said he sees this mainly in drunk people who fall down and hit their head on a hard ground. Doesn't mean it's outside. It could have been he fell down in the basement. There could have been one punch. The dog attacked him. He falls down on the cement in the basement floor, and that wound happens. So yes, I don't think it's a big surprise that that injury is from him falling down and cracking his head open. And also, when he's laying there, yes, he may not have died right away, but like John said, he's not active, he's not conscious. So at that point, he's just laying there. So he shouldn't be using his phone after a trigger event had occurred. And with that being said, again, he does not state that he was hit by a car and hit his head on the frozen grass. He just said he fell back and he hit his head on a hard ground. That could be in the basement as well.
Rick, what are your thoughts? How important, how big is this witness?
Huge witness, just as important as what you didn't hear. You didn't hear a vigorous cross-examination. Basically, Mr. Alessio was happy to get him to say that the injury to his forehead was not caused by this fall and left it at that. And this was a failing of the Commonwealth in the first trial, and I think really it was basically due to lack of experience by the prosecutor at that time. The whole effect of the coup contra coup, the bouncing basically of the brain inside the skull, causing an injury on the front of the brain and the back of the skull. It's fairly standard stuff. But as I've said throughout this trial, the message is only as good as the messenger, and this messenger was top notch.
All right, let's get back to Margaret and John's big three. The next one, this is one of Margaret's. The testimony of Kerry Roberts, one of the three women, or one of the two women that was with Karen Reed when she found John O'Keefe. Let's take a listen.
I got a phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning from Karen Reed. The first thing she said was, Kerry, John's dead. And then she hung up. The second time she said, I think something happened to John. I think he got hit by a plow. We drank so much, I don't remember anything from last night.
Okay, Margaret, why did you believe this was such a powerful piece of testimony?
Because Kerry receives a call from Karen at 5 in the morning, and the first thing that comes out of Karen's mouth is she thinks he's dead. John's missing, and I think she's dead. I mean, if he's dead, is that the first thing that somebody would say? Like, John's missing, he didn't come home, maybe he's on the couch someplace, help me find him. But the first thing that comes out of her mouth is he's dead. And I also felt that Kerry was significant because she described the damaged tail light, and Karen pointed it out to her, and she noticed how sharp it looked, and there were pieces missing. But I think the most important part of Kerry Roberts' testimony for me when I followed the trial last time was, the three of them, Kerry Roberts, Karen, and Jen McCabe, drive over together to John's home, well, to 34 Fairview, not John's home, 34 Fairview. And the second they get there, it's still dark, it's early in the morning, and Karen Reed bolts out of the car and runs over to where she finds John's body, which is covered in snow at the time. And how on earth would she know it was there? And another thing that I think is key is in one of the television interviews, Karen says that she saw John go into the house. Well, that makes it worse, because if she saw John go into the house, why would she the very next morning beeline to the far corner of the property near the flagpole? So it doesn't make sense. And I think that really hurts the defense case. It really helps the prosecution.
Nick, Rocco, what are your thoughts about Kerry Roberts?
She lied to the grand jury and she admitted it. It's pretty simple. So I think after that point, you have to kind of take what she says with a grain of salt. She admitted that she lied because she was told that Karen Reed said, I hit him. And she plays it off as, I misunderstood the question. Well, in front of the jury, she basically admitted that she lied. And I think that loses credibility on her part, no matter what she says after that.
Okay, let's get back to our list of Margaret and John's big three. We've got the third one, and this is one that John told us about. And these are the clips of Karen Read from her interviews with the media that are being played inside the courtroom in between witnesses. Let's take a listen.
At 12:41, I leave a voicemail to John where you can clearly, and this will probably be played on Monday, you can clearly hear me pull into John's garage.
So we approach from the north. We actually missed the turn. And John says to me, it's Fairview, we just passed it. It's back there. It was on my left. And I said, all right. So I pull nose into a driveway and back out onto the street, which I now have learned was Cedar Crest, and then come from the north onto Fairview. John and I argued the morning of the 28th, Friday morning. So he died, we think he died right around 12:25, 12:30 on the early morning of January 29th.
All right, John, why do you believe these are so important, these clips?
Vinny, they're so powerful. Obviously not played in the first trial, but it's not the Zabruta film. I mean, she's well lit. The audio is fantastic. There's no emotion with her. I think, early in the trial, you even mentioned, it's almost like a commercial break. Sometimes with witnesses, the jury drifts in and out. But with these, everybody's locked. They put the lights down. We all look up. We've talked about these two huge screens, and the volume is wildly loud. It's like when you're going to a movie and they play the coming attraction. Something else about the Karen clips, as I call them, Vinny, is, and no one talks about this, but I don't think Karen Read's very likable to the jury. I don't think there's a reason why the jury would like Karen Read, because these clips, they see her sitting there and, they've heard her voicemails, and they've also heard the text of her and Brian Higgins. And then we've seen clips of her talking about drinking. I just think right now, if you're the jury, she's doing these interviews. She's never emotional. She's never crying. She even mocks Peg O'Keefe. And it undermines the defense. Every time it's like one step forward, two steps back. Every time Alan Jackson in there trying to gain ground, a Karen clip comes on. And she mentions John got out of the car with a glass, or we did the three-point turn, or that they were arguing that morning. I believe the decision and the manner of precision they're using these Karen clips, they're wildly effective, and they're portraying her. They talk about in politics, you want to frame your opponent before they have a chance to frame themselves. I believe the prosecution of the Commonwealth has framed Karen Read in a very negative light by the use of her own words.
Rick Grundy, your thoughts about the clips of Karen Read that have been added here in the second trial?
The only thing I would say slightly differently is I think Karen Read has placed herself in a bad light, and the Commonwealth has assisted her far more in this trial through these clips. Other than that, I agree. She just, for all the work this defense team had put in, they don't seem to have done the simplistic work of just telling their client, you're charged with the murder of someone that you loved. You need to show that to the jury. Likely you will never testify, so you need to show that to the jury. And be honest with yourself. They are staring at you throughout the trial. So now, like the first jury, they have that opportunity to see them, but it's difficult to gauge a person under those circumstances. So now they're seeing her outside that too. And again, I think she comes across the same way. I don't know if she's enjoying it, but she's certainly not breaking down. She's not having any kind of difficulty discussing the topic. And one of the key things that I think this clip does, and the artful use of them throughout the trial, is it's going to highlight the fact that she does not testify. And I believe could happen, but
could happen.
I don't think she will.
Yeah. They know that she's talked outside the courtroom. Okay, our guests are staying with us. When we come back, we'll hear Nick Rocco's Big Three Plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan investigates who is telling the truth and who is showing signs of deception. A full hour of body language analysis as we take a look at some of the most important witnesses for both sides in the Karen Read retrial of the century.
That event lock, even according to Dr. Welcher's own words in his own slide, occurs 20 seconds after the end of the text stream event 11:62:2, correct?
Of the unadjusted clock, yes.
All right, take a look at the video. You see what we've highlighted there? Not Karen Reed, but behind Karen Reed. Yes, folks, that's Nick Rocco. You've seen him in court a lot. Welcome back. We're taking a look at the biggest moments, evidence, and witnesses according to our trial insiders. And back with us is Rick Grundy, Margaret McLean, John DePietro, and Nick Rocco. Nick, you're up this segment. We're going to take a look at your big three. Let's take a look at which is number one for you. The testimony of Dr. Irini Scortibello. This is the medical examiner. Let's take a listen.
You did not include in your autopsy in any fashion any discussion of whether Mr. O'Keefe's injuries were consistent with a motor vehicle accident, did you?
No, I did not.
Did you evaluate it all in your autopsy whether Mr. O'Keefe had any injuries consistent with a motor vehicle accident?
Objection. I'll allow that. Yes, I did examine his lower extremities. That is protocol in any case of suspected impact with a motor vehicle. So I did examine his legs, and I did not see any evidence of an impact site. What I look for is some sort of bruise, either on the outside of the leg or bleeding on the inside after the skin is reflected in the soft tissues, or any fracture of the bones of the legs. I did not observe those things.
All right, Nick, Dr. Scortibello, the medical examiner, why do you believe this is such an important witness and such an important part of her testimony?
So she is the state medical examiner, and she is the only one that actually got to physically examine John's body. And she states that there are no injuries that are consistent with being struck by a vehicle. And he has no bruises on his body. The only injuries are on the back of his head, and what he has is basically dog bites all over his arm. John O'Keefe, again, has no broken bones. He's getting hit by a 6,000-pound vehicle, and everybody wants to say, well, it only hit his arm, and he fell back and he hit his head. But if that were the case, he would still have some type of broken bone in his arm, or he would have a bruise on his arm. What we see in this picture right here are clearly from an animal. Some people have said, oh, it might be from when he's laying on the ground, an animal came out of the woods and, was gnawing at his arm. But there's a reason why the Alberts got rid of their dog after 7 years. And there's a reason why Hank Brennan did not want to call her originally. He didn't have her on the witness list at first, and then he put her on at the last second, and he had to call her because this is the state's medical examiner. How bad would it look that you're already not calling the people in the home, you're not calling the lead investigator, and now you're not calling the medical examiner because all the stories together don't add up to John being hit by a car.
Margaret, I'm seeing you react, so I've got to go to you. Your thoughts about the medical examiner?
Well, the medical examiner never said that those scratches on John's arm were the result of a dog bite at all. And in fact, she couldn't really be definitive either way as to what caused those particular injuries on John's body. She said, well, it could be maybe it could be from a fight, it could be from a collision. So I don't agree with Nick on those points.
Rick, what are your thoughts about the medical examiner here?
Well, I think, again, the medical examiner's investigation is limited, and purposely, experts are not supposed to be fed a lot of information about the investigation that is outside their purview, because they're supposed to make their determinations based on their expertise. And we've had instances in the past where an expert would make an opinion that they would not have made if not bolstered by eyewitness testimony, et cetera, that shouldn't go into, in this particular case, what was bite mark evidence. So, I think these arm injuries, they are a strong tool for the defense but they haven't been able to make, well, certainly in the first trial, they didn't make the most of it. And I'm baffled to this day that they showed up at the first trial without an expert to come forth and testify that these are dog bites. Took a long distance phone call from a woman sitting in her Barco lounger in California and brought her in mid-trial, and the judge let her testify. So I'll be interested to see if they...
Oh, that's going to be a big moment. I think that's a big part of the defense. Let's get back to Nick's big three. Let's take a look at the second one, which is the taillight found after Karen's SUV was seized. Here's Sergeant Yuri Buchanan from the state police talking about that.
This video here, this unequivocally shows that Michael Proctor walked toward the right rear area of that SUV, where the right taillight is, correct?
Yes.
And you'll also agree that this video was taken before any taillight material was ever found at 34 Fairview, correct?
Can you zoom in on time?
Not on this one, this is backwards.
I know that the SUV pulled into the garage, the Sally Port, at 5:35, and we were still on scene at 5:51, almost 52. So, yes, if that's timestamp before 5:51, before we left Canton PD, then yes, taillight pieces had already been found.
So 5:35, 5:37 is before the first taillight pieces were found, right?
I'd have to see a timestamp of when they were exactly found, but if that's...
5:37, 5:35 is before 5:45.
Yes.
All right, Nick, why do you think that the taillight pieces being found after Karen's SUV was seized is so big here?
So at 5:07 in the morning, when she leaves John's driveway, you can still see red taillight on her vehicle. The taillight is not completely missing, shattered into 47 pieces. They arrive at 34 Fairview Road around 6 in the morning. At this point, there's 3.9 inches of snow on the ground. There was not that much snow to the point where they could take a leaf blower and find a cocktail glass, but they didn't find any red pieces of taillight. So the taillight would have been around where the cocktail glass was. If the cocktail glass and the taillight landed on the ground at the same time, if John O'Keefe was struck by the vehicle, then they would have been at the ground level where the cup would have been. But yet they didn't find any of it. And then it snows more and more and more to the point where there's almost 2 feet of snow on the ground. And then they start getting shovels and they find taillight. But it just so happened to be, they didn't find any taillight until Karen Reed's vehicle was seized. And when they were towing her vehicle from Dighton at 4:17, which in the reports Michael Proctor had put, it was around 5:30 they towed the vehicle. Police officer Nicholas Barrows from the Dighton Police Department states that there was a piece missing and it was not completely damaged. And there's a reason why Hank Brennan would not call him to the stand this time as a witness, and now he is a defense witness because he's the only police officer that's not a part of the Canton PD or the Massachusetts State Police, and he has nothing to gain or lose from this. He's just telling the truth about what he saw. So how can you have a piece missing and not be completely damaged to now the taillight is completely bashed out and there's 47 pieces on the lawn?
John DePietro, your thoughts about the timing here of when the taillight is found and when the SUV is seized and the significance?
Vinny, I think it's very telling that that's what Nick is considering to be a big thing right now in the second trial. In the first trial, make no mistake about it, Proctor's presence loomed large. I was in the courtroom when he was on the stand and got demolished by Alan Jackson. And the same thing, it was big when they showed the inverted Sally Port. But this time around, the Sally Port wasn't a big deal. Proctor's not in the courtroom. He's not going to be in the courtroom. They try to say his name all the time. I don't think it means anything. Right now, what I see with this jury, Vinny, is when they think of the taillight, they think of the fact that Karen Reed said she broke her taillight, and then a small parcel of it, microscopic, was found in the clothing of John O'Keefe. Right now, unless the defense does something different, there's no element of a motive that police are trying to frame anyone for what happened. Not yet.
Let's take a look at the final one of Nick's big three tonight, and that is the glass on the bumper does not match the cocktail glass. Here's Christina Hanley, analyst from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab.
Taking these one by one, looking at starting with the bumper glass, category 2. Piece A did not match the cup, anything in 712 or anything in 714, correct?
That's correct.
Piece B did not match the cup, did not match anything in 712, did not match anything in 714, correct?
That's correct.
And moving over to category 3, there were some matches in these 9 items, 6 of them, A, B, C, D, F, and K, correct?
Yes.
But what those matched, Ms. Hanley, were the cup, nothing on the bumper, correct?
Correct.
And what didn't match the cup were E, I, and L. Is that right?
That's correct.
Moving back to category 2, however, there was one thing, item E, that did match something in this series of categories. Isn't that right?
Not a physical match, but instrumentally there was consistency.
All right. And this was an item, the only piece of bumper glass, the only piece of bumper glass to match anything else in your analysis. Matched what? What was consistent with what?
Item 3-3, piece E, was consistent in physical and instrumental properties with the sample that I took from item 7-14.
Which is the single piece of glass recovered by Michael Proctor, correct?
Yes.
All right, Nick, break it down for us. Why is the glass on the bumper not matching the cocktail glass a big deal here?
Well, it's a huge deal because, you know, in evidence, they're saying that this cocktail glass had something to potentially do with John O'Keefe and, you know, he had it next to him on the lawn. Yet Karen Reed has glass all over her bumper. And the only piece that matched up was a piece on her bumper that matched up was a piece that Michael Proctor found. Now, if none of it matches the cocktail glass, where does this glass come from? There's only one place that this glass could have came from, and it was in the possession of Michael Proctor. Hence why there's only one piece that matches on her bumper. No other piece there matches up to that cocktail glass that was found on the lawn. So where is this glass on her bumper coming from? Because don't forget, she apparently, quote unquote, hit John O'Keefe with her car. Glass is there. She drives to John's house. Then she drives to Jen's house, back to John's house, then to Dighton, then it gets put on a tow truck, and back to Canton PD. And this glass just stays on the bumper, just like that piece of hair stayed on the bumper. It doesn't match up. That was some of their evidence that they had against her. And it right there, it just goes to show, again, the name Michael Proctor comes up, and the jury wants to know who Michael Proctor is. And if the defense isn't going to, sorry, not the defense, if the prosecution isn't going to call him, they're going to wonder why he's being hidden from them.
All right, our guests are going to stay with us. When we come back, we'll hear Rick Grundy's big three. Don't go anywhere. No pressure, Rick. No pressure.
Wrapping up week 5, how do you feel?
I feel great. I'm anxious. I'm ready to put on our case, which will be more robust than it was last year. So I'm anxious for everyone to learn what we know.
The defense getting ready for their case because prosecutors are getting ready to wrap up their case gives us a moment to just take a breath and take a look at what has happened so far in this retrial. We've got our Karen Reed insiders with us, Rick Grundy, Margaret McLean, John DePietro, Nick Rocco, and all of our insiders gave us a list of their big three. Rick Grundy, you are front and center right now. Let's begin with number 1 from your big three, which is the jury's impressions of Karen Reed and John O'Keefe. Explain what you mean here, Rick.
Well, let's do the easy one first, and that would be Officer O'Keefe. And that's relatively the same, I believe, from first trial to second trial. You have an individual here who was a dedicated member of the Boston Police Department. You obviously have a close relationship with the family members who the jury's fully aware are present in court. And that big cherry on top of it is this guy was magnanimous enough to take his niece and nephew under his wing into his home after the tragic deaths of both his sister and his brother-in-law. So he's got the, you've got a picture of him that is rightfully angelic. And now you look at Miss Reed. Miss Reed is alive, and before them, and like I mentioned before, she's under a magnifying glass the entire time. And I don't think anybody has appropriately advised her of that. And I think throughout both trials, it has been difficult for her to react in a way that I think the jurors would say shows that she loved this individual, that she is bothered by the tragedy, that her heart goes out to the family that's present in the courtroom as well. The most recent one was she's 10 feet, 15 feet from her. She's got somebody holding up the pants that he was wearing when he died, the shirt that is bloodstained. And there's just not one iota of wave of change in her attitude. So what we have in this trial now is we have an added layer to Karen Reed because we're hearing all these snippets.
All the clips. Let me do this, Rick, because I want to have time to get through all three of them. Let me get a little reaction on this one from Nick. Nick, your thoughts. You're inside that courtroom. Karen Reed, the impression that she's making on this jury.
So the jury this time around is very similar to the last jury, except they're definitely younger, but they don't show much emotion. They're just kind of taking it all in. They're taking notes, but at this point, it's been 3 years of Karen Reed fighting for her life. She's become numb to the fact of seeing all this stuff. She never had the chance to grieve John O'Keefe because there was a restraining order put on her right when this happened. So she wasn't allowed to be around the niece and nephew. She couldn't go to the wake or the funeral. She can't go to the gravesite. So she never really had a chance to mourn John's death, except fight to stay out of jail. So she's seen the pants. She's seen the autopsies many times, and I think she's just numb to it at this point.
All right, Rick, let's go to number 2 on your list, and this obviously is a big one, the Lexus SUV. Your thoughts on what aspect? What do you mean when you say the Lexus SUV?
Well, I put that in there really as emblematic, the single piece of evidence that I think is most emblematic of what this case is all about. There is no smoking gun, as has been discussed in the past. There is a lot of things from which certain allegations can be drawn and defended, and I think the car is most representative of that. I think the testimony of the car slamming into reverse for a period of time, in conjunction this time with the brain surgeon who says that's exactly the kind of blow that's going to cause these injuries, is extremely powerful. The light, it makes my head hurt to talk about this broken tail light because it's just so all over the place. And again, I think there's a good defense tool, but it's counteracted by the other aspects of the car and the acceleration in reverse.
All right, Margaret McLean, your thoughts about the SUV. How big is it? The jury got to see the SUV during the view.
Oh, they did. And I also completely agree with you, Rick, on that one. What really was significant for me, the number one, was the data from the Lexus that put her back, pulling forward and then backing up. That Shannon Burgess's testimony, how she backed up and then correlated with John O'Keefe's phone, so they're traveling together. And it was 12:32:04 to 12:32:12, and then 12:32:09 was exactly 9 seconds was exactly when John's phone had that last it locked, and that was it. So to me, the SUV, the Lexus data really nailed it for me.
Speaking of timelines, you know what happened? We ran out of time tonight. But I want to thank everyone. Obviously, we'll be speaking again after the holiday weekend. Rick Grundy, Margaret McLean, John DePietro, Nick Rocco, thank you so much. When we come back, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight, plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, the Karen Reed trial has witnesses who have been subjected to intense scrutiny. Are they telling the truth or showing signs of deception? We'll bring in our body language experts to expose the truth.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
Is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was framed! We know who did it.
The Karen Reed Murder Retrial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board and what's happening in the world of crime and justice. Yes, it is trial day 9 in the Diddy sex trafficking trial. And guess who took the stand? Kid Cudi. Kelly Kraft, Court TV legal correspondent, is in New York City with the latest tonight.
Hi there, Vinny. Federal prosecutors called Kid Cudi to the stand today. He made his way into the federal courthouse early this morning. While on the witness stand, he testified that he dated Cassie Ventura in 2011. Federal prosecutors contend that Sean Combs was so jealous when he found out about their relationship that he allegedly broke into Cudi's home and later set his car on fire. Jurors saw photos of his damaged Porsche, a rip in the roof of the car, and smoke damage to the driver's side. The car destroyed by a Molotov cocktail. Cudi says he had been rebuffing Combs' attempts to talk after the alleged break-in, but after the car fire, Cudi and Combs had a meeting. On cross-examination, Cudi agreed that he felt played by Cassie Ventura, who went back to Sean Combs. After Cudi's testimony, he posted a message on his Instagram account.
This is a stressful situation. I'm glad it's behind me. And, yeah, I love y'all, man. Big love.
And Vinnie, court doesn't get back underway here in Lower Manhattan until Tuesday. On Tuesday, federal prosecutors are expected to call Capricorn Clark to the stand. She is a friend of Cassie Ventura and also was part of Sean Combs' inner circle. That's the latest from here. We'll send it back to you.
Kelly Graff in New York City with our continuing coverage of the Diddy sex trafficking trial. Okay. Take a moment, take a look at the screen. If you're just listening, you need to watch right now because we have a picture of a young woman who needs your help, a child, 16 years old. Truly Taylor Thomas is her name, missing since May 13th out of Las Vegas, Nevada. May still be there, or she may travel to Los Angeles, maybe Bakersfield or Oakland, California. Truly's ears are pierced, and she may go by the name Tay or Taylor. So please, take a look at the pictures. If you see Tay, Taylor, Truly, pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference. All right, folks, we've got another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.